For the artists, for the passionate. Welcome to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast. Alright, hello everybody and welcome back to the Adventures Elsewhere podcast, or welcome if it's your first time. I am your host Jade Black, and today I am talking about planning for publishing. This has been a long process for me, and it's still going, and I thought, well, at this point it's taking up so much space in my head, I might as well talk about it for half an hour. And also, this is, to me, an episode about transparency in publishing, because as we all know, there is not enough with that, especially with trad pub, but I don't necessarily think there's enough in indie pub either. So, here I am to be the change I want to see. So, planning for publishing, this is a process that for me began, I couldn't tell you how many years ago because I never made a note of the exact date and I'm still very annoyed about it. But it came from, really, once I realised how big the Determined Ones was going to be. And that doesn't, I'm not saying when I had decided on what the final lineup was, I mean when I realised that this was going to be an 8-book compendium, because 8 books is rather a lot. And I originally thought, once I got past the, oh yeah, this is just an 800-word flash, this is fine, I originally thought it was just going to be, a duology. Yes, I'm genuinely laughing at my own stupidity here. But anyhow, once I realised this was an 8-book behemoth, I started to think, okay, I'm kind of getting serious about all this though, and what the hell do I do about that? Because I am by no means the fastest drafter in the world, I'm really not. And yes, I have sped up a lot since then, but I'm not the fastest in the world. I'm never going to be. I am deliberately slow with my drafting, in some ways. In a sense of, I deliberately write stuff by hand, even though that's deliberately slowing myself down to stop the lazy drafting. I've got previous episodes on that. The first draft is a good episode to check out if you want more detail on that. But the conclusion I came to relatively quickly was, I need to have quite a few books written before I actually publish anything. Because if it's going to be, oh yeah, I release, one book one year, and then another book the next year, and then, oh wait, hang on, I'm out of manuscripts, so I can't publish anything for another 3 years, that's a bit shit. So, I ended up thinking, okay, well I need to have an amount of books drafted before I even really think about taking that further. And really I could do with having them edited as well, so that I'm not just in the editing trenches continuously for 3 years and wanting to kill myself. That sort of put everything on hold for quite a long time. And then Spark Pit happened. And Spark Pit came at the perfect time for me in thinking about all this, because I had literally just finished Snakebite when Spark Pit was announced. I think Snakebite was like fresh 1.1 draft or something. I have the exact details in the How I Won Spark Pit episode. But yeah, so I had 4 books drafted. I had Mr. Nakagami done, Black Executioner done, save for line edits, and then Penstem and Snakebite were both drafted. So, I was exactly halfway with regards to drafts, and it felt perfect. It was like, okay, well this is actually the time I can start thinking about these things, because things are going to be published, in an amount of time in the future, so by the time that comes out I'll have another book drafted and another thing edited and all of that sort of stuff. So actually that was perfect for me. And what Spark Pit taught me was, because I only had so much time to get everything prepped for that. You know, I had some manuscripts, and I had some very chonky query letters from when I queried Black Executioner way before its time. That was not embarrassing at all. I got a like in Pit Dark like one time. Okay. And I didn't know what I was doing. And I had a very, very rough bullet point synopsis for Miss Nakagami, I think. It had a chapter by chapter bullet point breakdown thing that I like to do before synopses. But I didn't have graphics, I didn't have anything. And most of the manuscripts weren't even, polished. Miss Nakagami was, but the rest weren't. So, I had a lot to do for Spark Pit in not very long, because it was announced in April or something. And the first pitching day was August the 1st. So, not long. And what Spark Pit taught me was how fast I can edit, because I am really fast at editing now. And it also taught me, the value of having templates and launch plans and asset lists and all of those things. So now I'm working on that for, further down the line, the sort of asset lists that I want and launch plan, bare bones type stuff now for Mr. Nakagami in a smidge under a year's time as of recording this. That's what I'm starting to work on now. I had an asset list for the Mr. Nakagami preversary, and a schedule and a plan for that. That was a thing that I did. And Kelsey Prees, it went down pretty well. So that has been really valuable to me, and even when it came to signing with SSP, I was by no means the first author to sign that contract. I was one of the last in that round, and because of that, they had a list of schedules that they were going to give out to different Spark Pit winners. And there were 8 schedules in this document, and by the time it was handed to me, about half of those had already been taken. And a couple of people already had sort of soft preferences, but they hadn't been confirmed. So the schedule that I thought was most ideal for me was actually already taken. And I had to make do with what I had, and the one I ended up choosing, and with, the first book ending in March 2025, I think actually proved to be the right choice. So, blessing in disguise. But I actually could have had Mr. Nakagami coming out this October. And I chose not to do that. And I chose not to do that on the basis of, well, I've got 4 books drafted, but because Spark Pit came along, I basically had to put all of my drafting on hold for months. And I'm now nowhere near where I want to be with Beneath the Moon or with Shadow on the Snow, and I feel really behind on that. And actually having a bit more leeway is no bad thing. Having something coming out in October this year, which would have been almost exactly a year from when I signed, I felt that was tight. Actually, I thought, well, because I was struggling at that point with both Beneath the Moon and Shadow on the Snow. I was very stuck in Beneath the Moon, and as of recording this, I have only gotten past that sticking point 3 days ago, and I thought, actually, I might need some more time here. So I chose to be later. So you'd think, okay, well, this is a lot of the planning done then. isn't it? You've got a release date, you've got a publishing contract for 8 books. What does this... Okay, where do we go from here? And it took me a while to figure out where I wanted to go from there. And an opportunity arose at Shadowspark very quickly after I signed on in the Cozy-ish anthology. And this was for originally a 20k piece of writing. It got shrunk to 15k in the end. And that was... And the timing for all the deadlines around that was absolutely horrendous, with all my deadlines for everything else. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to go into the anthology anyway, and I have a whole episode about my piece, Count the Stars, and that's actually a very recent upload, so that'll be very easy to find. And I outlined in that episode a whole load of reasons about why I wanted to go in, so, challenging myself to write something different, and exploring a story that I hadn't explored before and I was curious about, and having a little teaser into the world a year in advance, and a little teaser about Haru and all those sorts of things. And yes, those are all huge, huge reasons to go into the anthology. However, quite possibly the number one reason for going into the anthology was learning what the publishing process at Shadowspark was really like and what it felt like. And off the back of that, because this is something that I was, and this is probably true for anybody who's publishing for the first time, it was absolutely fucking terrifying. I thought, I don't know what this process is going to be like. I don't know. Like, there has been a Shadowspark podcast episode about editing, and they had gone into a bit of stuff around, how edits work at Shadowspark, but not really. I wanted to experience that for myself and see what it was like, and that's been huge for me to think, actually, this really isn't as scary as I assumed it was going to be. And having been through that and thinking, actually, I can handle these sorts of edits really quickly, because I was concerned about that as well. I was concerned about, okay, but how am I going to handle other people's feedback on my writing? And that's strictly because I have had times where I've dealt with some not great people with really not great feedback, and not done as well as I'd like to admit with that. I'm big enough to hold up my hands and say, yeah, I probably didn't handle that the best I could have done, probably, and it took longer than I wanted to, for sure. So I thought, well, how's that going to be with Shadowspark? Am I going to be the same way? And the answer is very much no, actually. I'm much better with that, and that is a testament to the quality of feedback. What that has also let me do is think more about what that means for longer pieces of work, because the anthology piece, that's a 15k piece of work. It's not like your usual anthology course, it's like 5k and submit. 15k is a pretty substantial chunk of work. For someone like me that writes shorter books because I write thrillers, that's a pretty significant portion of my book. And I can handle these edits lightning fast. So I don't really need to be absolutely catatonic about that in the same way that I have been up until now. And that's really good to know. But this wasn't the final puzzle piece. The final puzzle piece, and this has been a bugbear with this compendium since its inception, is what order do I actually release these books in? Because I've said many a time, really, that it doesn't matter where you start, or what order you read in, because they all read as standalones, and then you read the next one and think, oh yeah, wait, hang on, that ties into, oh no. That's what it is. It forms a full story, like a series does, and there are ties and links, and all of these things, but it's non-linear, so it doesn't matter where you start. But when it comes to release order, you've got to start somewhere, and then you've got to continue in a way. And for the longest time, I always thought, well, I'll just do whichever one's done. But this is me we're talking about. And I want things to be perfect. I'm a perfectionist. You know this, if you've listened to this podcast. You know what I'm like. And if you've seen me on social media, probably, you know what I'm like. It's not good enough until it's good enough. So I wanted the release order to be what I consider to be the ideal reading order, the order that I want to curate you through the compendium. And that's not necessarily in the order that is the most linear, it's definitely not that. It's the order that I think makes the most sense from a character to character basis and a themes and world and events basis. There's a whole years and years and years of thought have gone into this, but I think this is partly the curse, the blessing and curse of it being character driven is okay, but does jumping from this character to this character in the next release make any sense when they have very few ties? And my answer to that is not really. All of this release order, now that's set in stone, and you can see that publicly on my Pinterest, on my The Determined Ones board, for what it's worth. What that does for me, now I can see all that, is see exactly what I need to do, and when. So I can think, okay, well, I've just run into a massive problem with Shadow on the Snow again. Do I need to work on that first, or do I need to work on Beneath the Moon first? And I can see, well, Shadow on the Snow is before Beneath the Moon on the list, so really it should be that, because it's a lot easier to fill in gaps when I know what they are and I know really what these gaps are, than to think, I don't know what happens next. One of those things is a lot quicker and easier process, and Shadow on the Snow comes out first, so it needs to be done first. Simple as that, really. And one of the things that might seem odd in the release order is that some of my finished projects are quite late on. So Snakebite, I believe, is book 5 that comes out. And that on the surface might seem odd, given that the manuscript's polished now. I'm really happy with it. But what this means is, if Amber Shackles takes a lot longer than I think it will, I have leeway. I've got Snakebite that's done in the middle, and as seen on stage, is particularly awkward at the end. So, I've got two finished projects that come out very close to it, so there's a lot of leeway for as seen on stage to take longer than it might otherwise. But all this planning, it involves maths. And this is fine by me, I love maths, but I know that most people don't. And the maths in this case, for me, has been amount of doing time estimates, because I know how long certain things take now, especially thanks to Spark Pit. I know how long certain things can take, and Asset Lists, all of that really helps with all that. So I can think, am I gonna get the draft for As Seen on Stage done for it to be the second release? No, I'm not. So we're not gonna do that. But what has been more pertinent for me lately is figuring out exact release dates based on different schedules, because the way it's done at Shadowspark, and I imagine this is true for other indie publishers as well, is that your first book, the release date of your first book dictates when just about all of your other books come out. You have effectively a cycle that you go on, and with Shadowspark there are two main cycles. There's the classic sort of standard cycle that is one book a year, and it's basically to the day. So, one book will come out, say, let's just make it easy, let's say January 2025, and then book 2 will come out in January 2026, and so on. Or there's the rapid schedule, the standard rapid schedules, which is a 5 or 6 month. So you get, a book coming out in January, and then the next one comes out in June, and the one after that is in January, or, it's 5 months. So those are the fairly standard release patterns for Shadowspark. And if you've been watching Shadowspark authors and paying attention, you've probably realised this. And I say that like, anyone other than me did that in Spark Pit planning or anything. I may have gone a bit overboard. Just a bit. No, that is, like, genuinely something I did, was I sort of thought, okay, but what are their release schedules like? I know, I'll look at some of their more recently released books and series and see how much they space them apart. That is genuinely something I did. And so what I've been able to do, having looked at all this information and knowing cycles and things, is I've been able to calculate when all of my books will come out on different cycles. And what's great about Shadowspark is they allow you to come up with your own cycle. So someone like, I don't know how to say her name, so apologies if I've butchered this, but A.Z. Rain, who is the author of the Zodiac trilogy, has had her own slightly different release cycle that is not standard. So I've worked out a whole set of different release patterns, and I'm looking at that as which one of these would I like to do, which one of these do I really not want to do, and which one of these do I think is actually practicable. And that's the stage I'm at now. That's what I'm currently thinking about, is, okay, but how practicable is this? And I imagine some of you are thinking, okay, but hang on a minute, you said this was 8 books. And 8 books, kind of a lot. How, when you're talking about release schedules and, 6 months or so, over 8 books, that's quite a long time, isn't it? Well, yeah, it's more than 3 years. So how do you plan that around life? And the answer is, you can't. Really. And that is the nature of the beast. You kind of just have to give yourself leeway where you can, which I have done to the best of my ability, and you have to count on, these processes becoming familiar over time. And this is something that has come up in conversation with other authors, such as Valerie Storm, author of Demon Storm, and she's very nonchalant is not the right word, but very relaxed, I guess, about the whole publishing timeline and process, because she's done it so many times now. Her 6th book is coming out very shortly as of recording this, so she's just like, oh yeah, you just, you finish one, you chuck in the next, and you just keep going with it, and you just do it. And at a certain point, it's going to be like that for me too. You get used to it. And I am lucky enough as to have, very recently, as in the past few days, actually had some confirmation about what I'll be doing for the next 3 years. So I have a pretty good idea, actually, of, well, the next 3 years are going to look like this, and yeah, I can do books in that time. By the time that's over, well, I've done 6 books by then. Well, probably more like 4, but you get the point. I've done a fair number of books by then, so that's chill. I'll have had it all familiarised by then. What else I already have, besides all these plans, is I have materials. I have cover concepts for all 8 books now that I'm happy with. I know one of the front covers has already been made. I've got spines designed for all 8 books. Those I've hard designed as of a couple of days ago. I've got, manuscripts. I've got very refined processes for things like drafting and like editing. So I know what I'm doing. And there might also be another secret thing that I have at my disposal. But as I said, it's a secret, so I couldn't possibly tell you that one, because it's something that I wanted to get done for the Mr. Nakagami Preversary, but I ran out of time. But you'll see it soon enough. And it's actually something that's really quite exciting, and I will give you a little hint. It's making use of some emerging technology. So that's quite exciting. And talking of emerging technology, I hinted at what I'm going to be doing for the next 3 years. And I've talked a bit about on the podcast before, a few episodes, I don't know when, to be honest, but on the podcast a few episodes ago, a few weeks ago now, that I was looking at doing postgraduate study. And yes, I know I'm a bit late to the party, and I don't really give a shit what anybody has to think about that, but that is something I'm going to be doing for the next 3 years. I am actually going to be doing a PhD. And that is in an emerging field. I don't really quite know what to call it yet, in terms of the discipline it's in, but I thought that was a nice little update for you all. I think that is about all I have for this episode, besides talking about you. And if you are published or well on the way, then please do get in touch. I would love to be a part of your journey. You can do that via email. My email is on screen now. Indie and Soft Pub, you are the people I want to hear from. It doesn't have to be a new release. It can be 10 years old, 20 years old, whatever. It also doesn't have to be out yet. I'm happy to do things for pre-orders. I'm more than happy with that. There's no genre restriction. There's no age category restriction. It doesn't have to be a novel, novellas, short stories, poetry, whatever you've got. Bring it in. Let's see what we can do. Just make sure you read the information in the description first and include that in your initial contact. And if you're looking for me elsewhere, if you're here, you're probably looking for the home of the podcast and you're thinking, where can I get advance notice for what the episode of the week is? Because you can't get that on YouTube, even if you subscribe. But you can get it on Instagram. I'm Jade_Black21 on Instagram. You'll get advance notice what the episode for the week is. You'll also get soundbite teaser reels and other things as and when I experiment with them. I'm currently experimenting with what I do on there with regards to more about other people's indie books. So my latest read is Dustin Cummings' Exiles of a Gilded Moon Trilogy Book 1, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's a lot of things I hate. It really is. It's a big book, it's sci-fi, it's sci-fi fantasy. I don't like any of those things, but it might be one of the best books I've ever read. I don't dish out praise like that lightly, so you better check that out. If you are looking for me talking about my own writing and getting semi-live updates on that, Twitter is the place to be. I am JadeBlack21 on there. I also host the monthly Thrills prompts over on Twitter, and everybody's welcome, if you dare, to join in on that. And if you want a reason to join in that, other than that the community is genuinely awesome, the Thrills community is great, we hit trending for the second time this year with June Thrills. We hit trending last time with February Thrills. I wasn't expecting it to happen again, and it's super awesome. So come on in and join the fun. And if you're looking for a very fun place with lots of world building and lots of art stuff, that's Pinterest for me. That is Jade_Black21 on there. And relating to this episode, you can see what my release order is for the Determined Ones. If you want to take a look on Pinterest, that's on my The Determined Ones board. But until next time, you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a like. It helps the channel a lot. Intro and outro music by me. Copyright JBlack 2024.